Go for it.
Good morning, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to you. My name is Rosaline Govender, and I am from the Durban University of Technology. I am an academic developer, and I'm also the convener of the HELTASA Professional Development Collaborative Learning Community, also known as PDCLC. Previously, we were known as the PDCIC. Now we have changed our name. This year, we're known as the PDCLC. May I please ask everyone to please mute your speaker, your mics. Thank you. I will be hosting today's webinar together with my colleague Anthea Adams from Rhodes University. Please mute your mics. Please mute all mics. Thank you. Thank you very much. It is awesome to note that we have 19 universities represented here today, 19 public universities out of 26, and I think that's great. Well done. A special welcome to our international delegates from Limpopo University of Creative Technology, Maseru, and Namibia University of Science and Technology. Welcome. Also joining us are delegates from private institutions, and we also have some teachers here. Welcome, teachers. A special welcome to our guest today, Professor Owence Chabaya from University of Limpopo, Kibbie Naidoo from University of Johannesburg, and Dorian Love. Yes, we've got Dr. Love in the house from Rhodes School. So welcome, a special welcome to everyone. We've got about 187 participants that have joined in thus far. So I did ask a question on the registration form on what specifically concerns you about how the planned curriculum will now be enacted in a remote teaching platform. And some of the things that you said can be categorized as follows: assessment, practical work, coverage of content, quality of learning, teaching and assessment, and very, very big preparedness of both staff and students. And the issue that all of us are really grappling with is student access. And today's webinar is focusing on remote teaching, curriculum considerations. So I'm sure that we will be covering some of your concerns in today's webinar, but we are planning further webinars as part of HELTASA's response to COVID-19. So the format for today's webinar, we have 3 guest speakers, and each guest speaker will be talking for about 20 minutes. So we have a speaker, the first speaker will be providing some theoretical concepts and providing a foundation for us to guide us as we speak about curriculum. The second speaker will be focusing more on ideological and philosophical concerns when it comes to remote teaching and the curriculum. And the third speaker will be talking more about practical suggestions and using more an LCT lens. Thereafter, after our 3 guest speakers have spoken, we will open up for questions and answers. So please mute all mics so we don't get distracted. So to introduce our first speaker, Professor Owence Chabaya is an educationist with a special niche in the theory and practice of curriculum planning, teaching, learning, and assessment. Currently, she's the acting director for the Center for Academic Excellence at the University of Limpopo. In 2014, she won 2 Vice Chancellor's Research Awards for being the best female researcher at the university, as well as the best researcher in the Center for Academic Excellence. Her research interests include issues in higher education, academic staff development, gender and education, scholarship of learning and teaching, as well as assessment issues. Over to you, Owens.
Thank you so much, Rosalind.
Yes.
Are you hearing me?
You can start your video.
Okay.
Right.
It says you can't start your video because the hostess stopped it.
Okay. Nicola, you want to help with that?
Yes. It's still off.
Yes, Nicola will sort that out.
Okay, so can I start or I wait?
You can start.
All right.
We can see you now, Prof.
You can see me?
Yes,
because I'm not seeing myself. All right.
Look at the top of the screen and you'll see yourself.
All right. Thank you so much, Rosalind. And before I start, I want clarification. Did you say 10 minutes or 20 minutes on my part?
10 minutes, Prof.
Oh, thank you. I want to say hello, everybody on the platform. I hope you are all fine in this lockdown, but I can see it does not prevent us from pursuing our education agenda. My presentation today is on theoretical concepts and models that can inform staff in designing their teaching on remote platforms. As we all know, universities the world over, in the past few weeks, they were rushing to put all the modules wholly online. Now the question comes to say, it's done in a hurry? It has been rushed. Are all lecturers able to teach online? Are all students able to learn online? So with my presentation here, the theoretical frameworks, the theoretical concepts and models I'm going to share will give insights to lecturers on how they can design their teaching online on remote platforms. Now, the first theories I'm going to discuss or to present or share with you is called transactional distance theory. Now, with this theory, it says this is where there is a separation between a teacher and a learner. When there is that separation, you have transactional distance. And this distance is not just geographical distance alone, but also psychological. So when there is psychological distance between a student and a lecturer, you find that the student feels lonely, the student feels left alone. And at times with some students, they get so bored such that they drop out. So it is the role of the lecturer now to bridge that gap between the students and the student and the lecturer. And according to this theory, this gap can be bridged by how you structure your curriculum. That is course design, the dialogue, that is the communication which goes on between the lecturer and the student, as well as giving the student freedom to learn. That is what we call learner autonomy. So according to the theory on instructional transactional distance, they say if the structure is high, that is your content design, if it is high, and the dialogue, which is the communication of the student, is high, then that distance becomes small. Students feel that they are with the others. They feel that the lecturer is with me. They feel that other students are with me. And then if the structure is low and the dialogue is low, then the student feels lost. So with this theory, they recommend that lecturers should create when they design their curriculum, they should do it in such a way that it promotes the transactional distance to be smaller. Then the second theory I have is the constructivist approaches. You know, there are various theories which go into constructivism. But in general, with these theories, they emphasize on use of activities where learners construct new ideas and concepts by building on past experience and knowledge. So you can see they emphasize on activities by the student. So lecturers, when they decide on teaching, on planning their teaching on remote spaces, they should be guided, ensure that there are activities which students do. These theories also emphasize students taking responsibility for their own learning. And the lecturer is there to act as just a guide on the side. The key player is the student, and the lecturer just guides, supports the student. The lecturer is not there as an expert. So that is what the constructivist theories emphasize on. And according to this theory, it means when lecturers design their modules and how they deliver, they should put into consideration to ensure that there are activities for students, and those activities are based on what the students already know, and that is the previous knowledge. Then I also have 3 models for online design, which I am going to share with you. And if when you listen to those designs, you will see that all of them emphasize on the importance of conceptualizing the learning environment. The student was used to a campus environment where they'll be at one place. Now they are scattered all over. So now how can a lecturer create an environment where the student feels that he is part of the group, he is part of that community? And these modules also emphasize on activities by the learners. All the 3 emphasize on that. So the first model I'm going to share with you is the model by Oliver and Haring, 2001. In this model, they view online environment as consisting of 3 major components, namely activities, resources, and support. So in that environment, there are those 3 elements which should be present. They also buy from the constructivist perspective, and they recommend that when you design your lectures for the online teaching and learning, modules for online teaching and learning, begin by designing student activities. And this should be guided by your learning outcomes. We know all lecturers, they have the modules they are teaching, the learning outcomes are there, the objectives are there for the program. What is left is now how to achieve those objectives. So you start by coming up with activities which suit students who are in a remote platform. Then when you have your activities according to this model, then you design the resources which helps the student to achieve those, to do those activities. Then those resources, some you put there for them, you send them, and so on. Then lastly, you have to support the students as they do those activities wherever they will be. That is the first model. Then the second model is by Salmon, 2003. With Salmon, he came up with the 5 steps in his model for the online teaching. He states that he bases also his model on constructivism. And he says, this is useful when you intend to use online discussion groups. So when you intend to use online discussion groups, the lecturer should come up with the following stages. He should follow the following stages in constructing the group discussions. The first one is access and motivation. When you think of access and motivation, here he suggests that it's access of the student to the lecturer, access to the support, access to the content. A lecturer should think about that. And access to the support. How do you make your students access your support? That is the first stage. Then online motivation should be the second stage. The lecturer should think of how he's going to motivate, or if, for example, 700 students who are scattered all over the country, how can I motivate them when I come up with my program or my teaching strategy? Then there is also think about information exchange. That should be put into consideration. A lecturer has to think of ways on how students can exchange information. Exchange information on himself first. How do you make the student exchange information within himself, where he thinks, he reflects, he interrogates the information he gets alone, and so on. And also student-student interaction. How can you facilitate it in your strategy for online teaching? Then student-lecturer interaction should also come in for the exchange. Then knowledge construction is the fourth stage according to this module. There, the lecturer should think how the students can come up with the construction of knowledge alone or with other students, and so on. And then lastly, in the end, you'll see that if you follow those stages according to this model, you will develop, there will be development on the part of the student. The learner becomes responsible for his own learning because he has been very active there. Then stage module 3, which I have here, it is from Garrison and Anderson 2003. With Garrison and Anderson 2003, they emphasize collaborative learning in online teaching. They say for online teaching to be effective and be of quality, there should be collaboration. And when they talk of collaboration, it's collaboration between who and who, the student to student, student to lecturer. So a lecturer, when he's planning online modules or online strategies, he should think about collaborative learning, also put it into consideration. He should guide what the lecturer puts down according to this model. So they also talk that in learning communities, there are 3 components, because when you make discussion groups, you are forming learning communities. And in the communities of learning, there are 3 components according to this module. There is cognitive presence. As students debate and talk to each other, they will be sharing information. They will be making mind-provoking arguments that stimulate their cognitive presence. Then the second one, there is social presence. With social presence, a student will feel that although I'm learning here in my room alone, I have other students around me. They can collaborate as a group. They can be in a social space on their own. They can be on a social space with the lecturer. And that's where they share their frustrations and their joys with the teaching and learning in their module they are taking or the program they are doing. And we all know that when you are in a community, usually, if being in a community helps a person to remain in the program, it helps the student to feel the purpose of hanging on the program, and it reduces dropout rates. It reduces frustration of the student grappling with a learning material on his own. Right. Then they also say in collaboration, teacher presence also needed to be had. The teacher must not be absent. As students are collaborating on their own, a lecturer should should think of ways of being felt in those discussions in that remote platform. Then, in other words, Garrison and Anderson says this model helps to guide structuring of the learning, structuring of the assessment, and strategies and techniques one uses. So in short, I can say in conclusion, all these theories and models which I have presented, they are not all of them. These are just a few of them which I just picked and felt that in this era, when we are doing this movement from face-to-face or blended learning to wholly online learning, they can assist the staff when they prepare their programs, prepare their modules, design their modules. But if you look at all the theories and models I have presented, they emphasize on the following. They emphasize on activities to say it's very important. Students need to be active. A lecturer should think that, should put in mind that a student is to be active in my online teaching. The students, he has to engage the students. And lecturer facilitation is not that one of an expert, but just for guiding and supporting. So you should be on the side while the students do the real work on their own. And also the lecturer should think of collaboration in the planning and designing of his online curricula. And with collaboration, it helps to reduce loneliness on the part of students, dropout rates, because a student will be talking to others and feel the need to hang on the program and go on. It gives a sense of belonging on the students, although they are physically separate, but they'll feel that they are a group, and it promotes quality learning. With that, I can say thank you, colleagues. That is what I've presented. I prepared for these 10 minutes. I'm sure we'll have question time where we can continue with the engagement. Thank you very much, Rosalind. I've come to the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Prof. Owens, for this insightful, broad overview of the curriculum. As you've mentioned, I'm sure all of us have lots of questions, but we will get a chance to ask you those things. I want to introduce Kibbie Naidoo, and she will share ideas on the what and why of curriculum aspects. Kibbie is head of the Center for Academic Staff Development at the University of Johannesburg, and she's also the program convener for the Teaching Advancement at University, the TAU Fellowship. Kibbie's interests include scholarship of teaching and learning, rurality in higher education, curriculum development, and social justice in higher education. Thanks, Kibbie.
Hi, can you hear me? Good morning, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity. I think I must say at the outset that I really don't have all the answers, and I think we're all really grappling with really difficult issues and really difficult challenges at the moment. And I trust that everybody is keeping well and safe and healthy, and that's most important at this time. I also want to acknowledge the contributions to this talk of Vanessa and Himali and Nalini, all of whom have been talking to me on a regular basis about some of the issues that they're addressing and they're facing. I also wanted to say that there are lots of people in this room that are much more qualified than I am to talk about this, but I will try to keep this short so that their contributions can be heard as well. But really, in this presentation, I want to argue that at the moment, it's crucial for us to rethink curriculum. And not to do so could result in practices which could contribute to social injustices and reverse many of the gains we have made in higher education with regards to access and inclusion. I think the need for physical distance has meant that we have to rethink how we continue to teach and move into this online remote teaching and learning space. This, as many of you know, is not simply a question of, and to use this phrase that's been bandied around now, pivoting online. Administrators and staff in all our universities are working extremely hard, I think, to make decisions about teaching and learning, about teaching and learning, and they're making this decision in a context where we're not fully aware, or we don't fully understand what the realities are. There's so much we don't know. And what we do know paints quite a worrying picture. The students that we have been engaging with are understandably extremely unsettled. Many, if not most, are panicking. And these are even students where technology, for students for whom technology is freely available. And their anxieties, and I'm sure many of you have seen this on Twitter, range from data access, costs, access to Wi-Fi, not having devices, not having spaces to work. I mean, there's some really worrying images. And these anxieties are not only related to the studies, and we cannot separate this from issues of food and general economic insecurity, family responsibility, fears of getting sick, and a host of others. All of these will profoundly affect success and their successful completion of the term. Owens just talked about the importance of learning environments. And I think that's something we don't have a full picture of, a full sense of what learning environments students are working under. For academic staff who are asked to quickly change their mode of teaching and to make use of technology to teach students remotely, it's equally scary. Concerns about students not having adequate knowledge on how to use technology, their own family circumstances, and a general sense of, I'm on my own in this, is really overwhelming. I must acknowledge that in many institutions, divisions of teaching and divisions of learning with technology have been doing an amazing job in assisting staff to move their modules to online teaching and learning. The rush, however, with which this has been done has resulted in a kind of technicist approach, I think, that does not do justice to the work that these specialists have done for decades. And Ronaldo Walcock from the University of Toronto makes the point. And he says that for at least a decade or more, faculty in universities and colleges have argued that online teaching requires not only special skills, but an entirely different approach to course and material delivery. And as they made that case, they won concessions from education authorities who placed online learning or online teaching in a special pedagogical bracket. With coronavirus, however, those cautions disappeared almost immediately. And now the focus is more on how we teach and how we assess. The issue of assessment comes up constantly as a concern for both staff and students, understandably so. We place a lot of emphasis on assessment. And as I looked at what institutions globally were doing to address the problem, I was struck by the fact that assessment and teaching have been talked about in isolation, and curriculum is hardly ever mentioned. Yet, so much of what we ought to be addressing now as academics involves reimagining curriculum. Curriculum, as many of us know, can perpetuate social inequalities. And unless we explicitly address this in our planning, this will be exacerbated as a result of COVID. Socially, curriculum development involves, first and foremost, socially justice curriculum development, I think, involves first and foremost an acute recognition of and consideration for all involved in the teaching and learning process, understanding their circumstances and the broad array of affordances, but also constraints. And in this current context, the constraints are numerous. As academic staff, we make a number of choices when we develop our modules. If we draw on Bernstein's pedagogic device, this involves recontextualization, a process of translating disciplinary knowledge into curriculum. We give a lot of thought on how we sequence, how we decide on what comes first and what follows, how we pace, how much time has to be spent on particular topics. These are all things that we think about, and it takes us a while to make decisions about these. We also make decisions about how to facilitate, how best to facilitate students' learning, and how to assess. How do we best gauge where the students have learned? These are just a few of the things we have to plan for. All of this is about curriculum development. And if we see and recognize the interconnection between why we teach, how we teach, what we teach, we would see it's not just about making changes. We have to consider the implications of making those changes. We have to consider the what and the why more explicitly. As a socially just curriculum is not a product. It's a process of engagement. It's a process involving co-creation of knowledge. And I think Owens talked a bit about that earlier. One of the most important implications of the shift to remote learning in light of the contextual issues that I've just outlined is about how much teaching can happen under these current circumstances. And that was a question that came up when Rosalind introduced the session, people talking about the content and how we actually cover content. And at this point, I think academic staff have to consider covering less content than they originally planned. And this will have implications for the program as a whole. This means that academics then have to actively engage in dialogue with their colleagues in their disciplines or programs. Curriculum conversations are crucial right now, not just to alleviate the loneliness in the sense of I'm in this and alone, but also to engage with each other to see what am I doing, what changes have I made that have implications for you as somebody else teaching another group of, or teaching the same group of students in the next semester. These are really important things. But most importantly, and I think this is a hard one, I don't know how to do this, but we have to find ways of involving our students. And not just to engage with colleagues, but to engage with our students. I think students are feeling very alienated right now from the process of how decisions are being made for them. And Bovell and Wilmer make a very strong case for including students in curriculum development process, arguing for the ways in which they can actually enrich the teaching and learning process. But they also give us a very, very good understanding of the context that they are learning in, and their context can enhance the curriculum in many ways. So I think for me, the most important thing about this is we've got to look at inclusivity. It's really important that we become really creative and have curriculum conversations involving not just specialists and discipline specialists, not just the teaching and the specialists in online teaching, but also to involve students and others who may have unique contributions to make in helping us understand the current problem that we are facing. This is not, I believe, a time for silo thinking, okay? This is an unusual situation which may require some reimagining, but most importantly, collaboration. I think this was a theme that I pulled out from Owens' talk as well, the importance of collaboration. So what are the three takeaways from what I've been saying? The one is that curriculum is vitally important right now. We've got to think beyond just how we assess and how we teach. The decisions that you make, however small, will have broader implications. And we have to engage in the conversations in ways that involve active participation by a variety of people, variety of groups of people. So dialogue is important. So if you haven't started these dialogues in your institution, please do. These are vital. I also think that if you're like me and feeling really overwhelmed, I thought at the beginning of this process, I really need to start a diary. I need to document what's happening, because this is going to fundamentally change the way in which we think about higher education. I haven't really been successful in doing that, because sometimes it just takes a word. Sometimes all I can put down is a word. But I think that we do need to keep ourselves open to the possibilities of learning and engaging. And I'm really grateful that we have this opportunity at HELTASA to do this, and in other fora, because I think that the lessons that we learn now are going to actually be lessons that we take into the future and into the ways in which we consider how we think about teaching and learning in higher education. I'm going to stop there, because I think that this may have sparked lots of thinking for many people, and there will be some valuable contributions that people can make. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kibbie, for reminding us about the complexities of enacting the curriculum on the remote learning, remote teaching platform. It's really complex, and we really are grappling with these questions, the what and the how. And I think for students also, we need to hear their voices, and it's been silenced. Our next speaker is Dorian Love. Dorian teaches ICTs at the Rodian School in Johannesburg. He has a master's in education from Wits in educational technology, and he's in the preliminary stages of putting together a proposal for a PhD looking at the professional practices of computer teachers. He blogs extensively on the topic of EdTech, and is part of the ZA Edu Twitter PLC group, which has been active in helping teachers to take the leap into the online space. He's a member of the Lct at Wits group, which is exploring ways in which legitimation code theory can help us think about remote teaching. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to share a presentation. It says you cannot start screen share while the other participant is sharing. So, okay, let me try that now. Here we go. And okay.
Cool, Dorian. So, you might just want to put your make your screen big, your slides on presenter view.
Okay, so presenter view.
With a little icon at the
There we
bottom.
go. I think there we go. So I was just reacting very slowly to, and I think that's a big reminder of how low tech we should be trying to go. So a lot of work has gone into the kind of giving students formal access, and I think we're failing miserably at that. Access to devices, data, in many places, electricity, and these are huge concerns. And I think Kibbie is absolutely right about also the psychological concerns and the pressure that everyone is under. Some of the sage advice is for lecturers, for teachers to try and cover half the content in double the time, purely because of these technical difficulties and psychological difficulties that we're all undergoing. So I'm a member of the LCT at this group, and this presentation is very much part of the group think that's emerged around our discussions around curriculum and what we should be doing in this time of coronavirus. And I think the very urgent need to start moving from purely looking at formal access, how we get teachers and students online, which has necessarily consumed a lot of our time, and trying to get Zoom set up or trying to get the platform set up, but to start thinking about epistemological access, which is about access to the knowledge, access to relevant, powerful knowledge that students require. And I hope that going forward, if we start to get some of these things right, even when lockdown ends, when remote teaching ends, we will have made some gains in our thinking around curriculum and empowering through curriculum. So LCT theory, I don't want to get too heavily into this, but if you look at this diagram, LCT theory has 3 dimensions that have been fully fleshed out. And the one I would like to look at in the 10 minutes available today is specialization. Now, specialization is all about the interplay between knowledge and the knower. So Carl Mayton has argued from the work of Pierre Bourdieu on social actors, knowers, and Basil Bernstein on knowledge, that all knowledge really has both knowledge and knower structures. And in other words, it has epistemic relations, which on this diagram you can see represented on a spectrum from very strong at the top and weak at the bottom. In other words, very strong, the knowledge is important in a particular field, or very weak, knowledge is not particularly important in a field. And social relations, which is all to do with the knower, which ranges in the horizontal axis of this Cartesian plane from weak, it doesn't matter who you are, you can have an opinion, to very strong, where who the knower is vital in terms of legitimating the knowledge that they present. So if we think about it, science, for example, is very much a knowledge code. It doesn't really matter who you are. If you have the knowledge, then you're a scientist. But literary criticism, on the other hand, the knowledge is not that important. What's far more important is your gaze, how you look at things, your approach as a knower. A relativist code is where neither of these things are really important. So anyone can have a point of view. Everyday discourse, for example, everyone's point of view is valid and no particular knowledge is required. And then elite codes, such as music, for example, where knower aspects are very important. You have to have an ear for it, but the knowledge is also very important. So this brief framework I'm going to use now to look at Moocs. So perhaps the biggest model that we have for going online remotely is the Mooc. It's been going for about a decade now, and they promised huge things in the beginning. They were going to disrupt education, and it didn't really work out. So what's the problem with Moocs, and how can we learn from this when we're designing our curricula? So the classic kind of Mooc approach, certainly the Moocs that most of the Moocs that I've been involved in have this kind of triad. You have a short video lecture, you have a quiz, which checks your comprehension, that you've understood what you're watching, basically checks that the student is watching the video. And then there's some kind of peer-assessed review. So many of the Moocs had like 100,000 participants, and there was no ways that a teacher could grade any of that. I mean, who would want to take that job on. So Daphne Koller did some research and found that peer assessment was just as valid as the teacher's assessment. So if you look at these this triad, I think we could agree that online videos and the short quizzes are very much about the knowledge. So it fits very well with a knowledge code. You have a match with knowledge code. Peer-assessed writing seems to fit more with a NOAA code. The problem with many of the Moocs is that this peer assessment was a bit of a nuisance. You know, you had to write a little bit about what you'd heard, and it was marked by fellow students, and no one really valued it that much. The assessments, the writing was always quite short. You couldn't really set a major academic essay or anything like that. So whereas Moocs, I think, have presented fairly good models for doing knowledge work. So you can present knowledge online quite easily. A video can unpack a particular concept. In fact, it has affordances which could make that quite valuable. For example, graphic display or bringing in videos and things like that. So I think we can say that the standard kind of classic Mooc fits a knowledge code quite well, but not that well for a NOAA code. But here's a Mooc which I think kind of explodes that view and allows us to see an alternative. So this was one of the Moocs I took early on, and this was, I think, still the greatest Mooc that I've ever attended. It was modern and contemporary American poetry, so very much in that kind of NOAA code. You know, who you are as a NOAA is what is important mode. And what this Mooc did very differently was, instead of presenting short instructional videos, because the knowledge is not really what's being foregrounded, it was presenting, instead what it took is the kind of classic prac-crit approach. So a bunch of students sitting in the professor's office and going over a poem, and the participants contribute to the knowledge building going on. They share their views, they ask questions. And these videos were posted online, the professor and the teaching assistants. So even though you, amongst 100,000 other viewers taking the Mooc, could not participate in the questions directly, you heard other students who were kind of a similar level to you posing questions sometimes that you wouldn't have thought of. And this is a tremendously valuable affordance for this kind of work. So what this Mooc I think showed was that you can shift into NOAA spaces as well. It's not just knowledge codes which are afforded by online work. I'd also like to discuss very briefly, I couldn't find it online. It seems to have disappeared from Google searches, but it's the Mooc that failed. It was the Mooc about Moocs. So it was arrived, much heralded. This was going to be in the early days of the Mooc. It was going to be a Mooc about how to organize, design a Mooc. And it completely failed. But it failed in a very interesting way. So what it tried to do, again, trying to set up a kind of more NOAA code matches, it tried to set up groups, to set up the kind of collaborative work that we heard of from the first speaker, by organizing students in smaller groups, and they could then work through more meaningful tasks than you could in just a short quiz or a short peer-assessed writing. And the platform collapsed. They tried to do it through Google Suite, and that was much less advanced than it is now. The whole thing collapsed, the whole Mooc collapsed. But I think in their ambition, you could see where you could work towards more NOAA codes. So what I'm suggesting for remote learning, and what we need to look at, is to try and use the affordances of the platforms as much as possible. And I'm afraid there's no kind of practical advice really that you can give other than doing it yourself. Every subject, every context, every bit of a course design is different. So when you're teaching one thing, it might be much more knowledge-based. If you're teaching something else, it might be doing more NOAA work. And you kind of need to think about strategies that will fit with that. So what's absolutely crucial is a strong teacher presence. So in the ModPo MOOC, for example, the TAs, the lecturer were all over the MOOC. They were answering questions. I don't know if they slept during that time. They had Twitter groups, they had Facebook groups, and you could post a question, and likely as not, the lecturer themselves would answer it. And remember, this is with 100,000 students. I've done other MOOCs where the TAs were working the whole weekend. This was in coding MOOCs. We're working the whole weekend looking at students' code and giving suggestions how they could fix their Python code. So teacher presence is absolutely vital in any online work that you do. And I think also you need to prioritize the code matches and play to the strengths of the platform. That, of course, requires getting to know the platform. So until you've jumped in, until you've actually started doing it, and you're going to make mistakes, but let's hope we all fail forward. Try and find out what those code matches in. When you're doing very knowledge-y stuff, you know, maybe posting an online video is fine because it kind of fits in that. A video can explain a concept very well. When you need to do more know-y kind of stuff, then perhaps try and get more collaborative work, an online meeting rather. So I think for that knowledge work, online videos, the short quizzes, the kind of classic MOOC idea, I think that kind of works. I know a lot of lecturers are very concerned about if they post an online video, what happens to the copyright and so on. You know, universities might use this opportunity to say, okay, now we've got the videos, we can sack the lecturer. And that's mistaking it entirely, because if you're just getting a little concept in knowledge and then another little video and another little video, what's not happening is the connections between them. You're not building knowledge over a longer period. And it's that building work which the teacher is so involved in. And if you're thinking about, so maybe if you're trying to stick in that kind of knowledge code, then maybe instead of just posting a video, host your lecture online. And then you can respond to student questions in real time. If you're doing more NOAA work, online seminars, and it doesn't really matter that maybe all of the students can't access it at the same time. Maybe enough of them can that they're asking some questions, questions that other students would have wanted to ask, or maybe even hadn't thought of asking. And the teacher answers those questions, and that, you know, if you make a recording of that online meeting on Teams, Google Classroom, or whatever it is, or on Zoom, then no, that might well satisfy what's going on. I think also a lot of NOAA work would depend on reflective writing, building a portfolio of work, perhaps major projects if you're doing coding work, for example, or getting students to do blogs. So I think we need to get really creative, thinking not just of how to teach online, but also what are we going to teach and what is the best way of teaching it to give the greatest amount of epistemological access to students, even if they can't access it straight away. So we need to think that most of our students are not going to be able to get online at the same time for whatever reason. But if we make a recording, for example, and that's available, then, you know, I think we can make big leaps forward in terms of producing manageable and meaningful epistemological access for our students. And I'm going to stop there because I think I've probably run out of time. There's a lot more that could be said about LCT and its contributions. So watch the space created by the LCT at Wits Group. Shameless academic plug. Thank you.
Thanks, Dorian. Thank you very much. So we're going to open up. We've got a few minutes left. We're going to open up for some questions or comments. So what people do, if you want to speak, please type M in the chat box, and then we will hand over the mic to you. When you do have the mic, please state your name, ask your question, make your comment, and you can say thank you when you are done, so we know. Any questions? I saw Roche wrote something earlier that it is the pedagogy that should drive technology. And I think we, in this rush to put everything online and to try to get work completed or the curriculum completed, we've kind of sometimes we lose sight of that pedagogy should drive technology. Okay, I can see Jason. Yes, if I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Hi,
Jason,
can you hear me?
Yes, Jason,
Hi.
go ahead.
Hi. Listen, I agree with Dorian, but the problem is that we've got to be very low tech. So I'm not sure how we're going to get to the beyond the quizzes and online questions to the more deeper knowledge base. Hello?
Yep, Dorian, would you like to take that? Thank you, Jason. Dorian, you'd like to respond? If you have an answer. Your mic is off, Dorian. Dorian, switch your mic.
It's a bit too high tech for me, you see. Jason, I don't really have an answer to that because every single context is different. And my great belief is that you have to, as a teacher, you have to kind of put your foot in the water and try what works for you in your topic, your field that you're working in with your students. I advised one of the teachers, this was just before we went to teaching online, just before we had to leave the school, go remote, and she was really struggling with the technology. And I said to her, do you have email? And she said, yes, I've got email. And I said, if that is what works for you, then that's what works for you. And, if you've got an email, a group, and you're replying to all and everyone can see answers and questions, that's a form of engagement, which is very, very useful and takes up less data and is far less high tech. And then perhaps once you're very comfortable with that, you can move on to something else. So I would start with what's comfortable and what's possible, and then try and experiment with that to try and get the greatest pedagogical use value out of it.
Thank you. Anthea, you want to take the next question? Okay. Willie, you had a question? Willie.
Thank you. My question has to do with attitudes and perceptions towards online learning, particularly from the teachers and the students. So from the teacher's side, I am seeing that some lecturers are not too keen, and others are very excited about this. And there's sort of like a division amongst the lecturers themselves, that they like a grouping, those that use technology and those that are not using technology. And those who don't use technology, their best attempt is to try and just hog the learning management system with PowerPoint presentations and not really engaging. So that's the one side on the attitudes amongst the lecturers. And then a second, what I'm observing amongst the students is the students, some of them are saying, well, we want to learn online, but there are other prevailing socio-economic realities that we're going through. You've seen some universities now saying, we'll help you get laptops and things like that. How do we address attitudes? And I think maybe it's not the right time because we need to solve the problem first, and then maybe later on, how do we teach new tricks to old dogs, if you like, and the issue of attitudes? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Willie. Owens, you wanted to respond?
Okay, thank you very much, Rosalind. My response, because from the question, the previous, the one who has just asked the question, there was another post here on the chat which was presented, which is similar to that one, where someone said, this morning I had one lecturer screaming, I was dragged into this 21st century thing. I didn't copy everything. Here I know that the issue of, there's always fear of the unknown among many people. And it needs time for it to be got rid of. I just want to share with participants what one author said, and he inspires me quite a lot. And this is Alvin Toffler. He wrote a book in 1970, which was called Future Shock. That was the title of the book. That is the title of the book. And in that book, he said, in the 21st century, illiterate people will not be those who cannot read and write, but it will be those who can't learn, who can't unlearn, and who can't relearn. So for one to fit in this 21st century, according to this author, one is just you have to learn and learn certain things and relearn. And he went further to say, with this learning, unlearning, and relearning, it doesn't matter about the knowledge you have, your age, your qualification, or your experience. If you don't do those three things, you'll be irrelevant, especially in higher education. So I think there is a lot to be done to ensure that every member of staff is brought on board on this movement, which everyone we are facing now. That is my contribution, just to share what some authors are saying about this thing.
Thanks very much, Prof. Anthea shared a book on the chat. We can find some answers to these questions in Reimagining Curriculum Spaces for Disruption, edited by Lynn Quinn, 2019. I think it's a great book that we all should have a look at. And I know Nicola, she wrote a comment earlier in the chat saying that remote teaching is a new kind of preacher. And theories that we have about teaching and learning, we can't really look at those theories. But I would say that in the absence of not having anything, and we are in an emergency situation, we will have to fall back on something. And we'll have to go and look at those theories and extract what we can and then adapt it for this emergency situation that we find ourselves in. I saw that Indo VN, did I have a question? NDOUVN, Indo VN, would you like to ask your question? Is he around? Indo VN. Sashaba, you also had a question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Please go ahead.
This is Indo. Yes.
Hey.
Hello.
Okay, Indo, go first, and then we can have you, Sashaba. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm actually Indo Vince from Mango City University of Technology. Actually, mine is referred to Prof. Chabaya with the issue of the theoretical concept and model to develop online teaching. Yes, I've done that, and I've developed the online teaching platforms. However, I have a bit of a challenge with regard to the students. Most of them are saying that they are keen to participate. However, they don't participate, and they tell you that they don't have data bundles to connect. And some of them are saying that they have problem with network coverages where they stay. So that poses a huge challenge, because if they are saying that they're willing to participate, however, they don't have network, I don't know how you can deal with that, even though you as a lecturer, you develop the material for online teaching. However, it's not reaching the students who are intended to benefit from that. So I don't know how we can deal with that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have Sashaba. Is Sashaba there?
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yes, I am here. I am from the National University of Lesotho. And so my question is, how do we get to motivate lecturers to communicate more with the students when we are encouraging them to use an asynchronous mode of teaching. I think we are aware that with some of the learning management systems that we use, most of them do not even notify you when there's a message in the chat group. So my question just centers around how do we then get to motivate them to dialogue more with the students? Thank you.
Thank you. Remember, this is a collaborative learning community, so you're welcome to answer if you have an answer. We leave it to the panel and to anyone else who's got an answer. Anyone's got an answer for Sishaba? I've seen previously that people wrote about looking at the pacing of learning and how we can pace learning so students can decide the pace at which they want to learn. So, but that will, we would have to rethink the way we structure our teaching and learning. So looking at pacing and self-pacing. Anyone else would like to respond? How do we encourage students to engage on online platforms?
Owens, you want to come in?
Yes, Owens.
Okay, thank you so much, Rosalind. That comes in on the designing of the strategy, on your teaching strategy on platform, on the learning platform. One reading I had on tips on how to prepare your lectures for online lectures. The first point, it was talking about the lecturer putting the rules, clear rules to the students, giving deadlines all the time, checking on those deadlines, and also the lecturer in his planning each day to put aside 1 or 2 hours where you state clearly to your students that this is consultation time. Anybody can get hold of me through any other platform for discussion, for explanation, and whatever. And the lecturer, after putting the work for students online, don't just sit that they are working. Continue to probe. I think Dorian talked about lecturer presence to say, although they will be on a remote platform, your presence should be felt all the time. Think of ways of being felt by your students. Sending small notes, even at times on WhatsApp groups, even on times on emails, even on times on chat groups with your class. And then that's where you give them, even reminding them about deadlines, so they'll be motivated to meet those deadlines. And also encouraging every student to participate in the discussions. And one author indicated that at times you can attach a mark on participation in group discussions online, where you can say 5% or 10% is for group participation in the group. And that's when they said those who are not very active, the lecturer should be proactive to reach them, talk to them. They may be needing a lot of assistance and they'll be quiet in a certain corner. Check on all those things in your online teaching and learning. Those are just the tips which some authors give. Thank you.
Thanks, Owens.
Thank you, Rosalind. Can I add something?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Rosalind, and thank you everyone for joining. So my name is Lucian and I'm from Tanzania, but currently I'm in India doing my PhD studies. So I would just like to add something on how to motivate students in the online environment. So one of the things that we have been doing it when we are in Tanzania designing and thinking on how we can be able to help students is that we are trying to design some activities which they can be able to work on them much more easily. So the first thing we do in the design is that you have to make sure that the activity you are designing is much more clearer and well stepped, so that students can be able to go through the activities much more easy, can be able to read all the instructions that are required to be able to be done on that particular activity, and then they can also be able to attempt that. So that is one part that we do. But then whenever you are giving an activity online, it's good that you can be able to give them some incentivization. So give incentivization to each of the activities so that they feel like I have to do this and I have to complete this. So incentivization could be in terms of giving some little bit of marks on each of the activities, that so that each student feels like, yeah, this is part of me, and in the end, this will be totaling to what I have to get at the end of the semester or at the end of the course. So that could be one of them. But again, if you can be able to set up time, as others have said, put some synchronous sessions with the students so that they feel like the teacher is there, he or she is giving us some feedback, and we can be able to learn from them. And in many cases, when you are actually, maybe if you're using WhatsApp, for instance, as one of the tools you're using, you could be able to give some, what you call audio feedback. So you look into the discussion on how it is going on, and then you can give one summary feedback of the audio note of everything that has been happening, trying to clarify all the misconceptions, bringing them to the point, and then putting some other questions that can be able to generate some other deeper discussions into that particular topic. I'm sure the moment you are in the platform and sharing and driving the discussions, following down, it becomes much more easier for the students to be able to follow. But again, if you're using platforms like Moodle, Moodle has a progress tab, which shows the students how they are doing in each of the activities. As much as you submit one of the activities, it shows you your progress. This is 80% or this is 60%. So that keeps you moving as well. So in some of the platforms, it's not enabled. So if you can be able to enable that, and the student sees that, yeah, I have 50% now, I have 70%, it keeps him or her moving, knowing that, yeah, I have to reach this particular milestone, which is 100%, and now I'm at 40 or 50. This keeps me moving as well. So I thought of adding these points. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucian. Please, we've got about, we will take this on to about 12:30. We're supposed to finish at 12, but we'd like to have more engagement. Thank you for those who've joined us. And I know some people are leaving to attend other meetings as well. Rivalani wanted to speak. Rivalani, thank you.
Thank you, Rosalie. I just have some few contributions to add on from what others have said already. I think the kind of students that we have, particularly in this generation, are students that are very, very, they are so much attached to technology. So simulation softwares are so powerful, most especially the 3D ones. They are so powerful and they are interactive, full of colors, and they are designed in a very creative ways. And I believe they can be applied to any subject. There's no limit to what they can do. You can pour something in physics into a test tube. You can do some, you can deassemble a computer in computing through simulation. And it's very interesting for most of the students. So I think that will also motivate them to participate more. And again, there's the issue of socially sound curriculum that somebody talked about. In my view, I feel like to solve this urgent need of laptops and access and so on, the money that was supposed to be directed to tuition and things that are associated with using the physical infrastructure, maybe it's about time that we consider redirecting that money into those devices. We make sure that everyone is covered. And in that way, we'll be able to cover everyone to finish off this year. And also to remind everyone everywhere, things are changing. Everything is going online. And I hear that some of us are talking about normality coming back. From the look of things, we may not have normality as we knew it to be, because you can see we have things like currencies are becoming a global things. Now we have cryptocurrency, transportation, we have Uber software, we have online shoppings, Amazon, and so on and so on. So I think we should be ready to embrace the change. Maybe it's about time that we think, strategically for a long term over this change. But to solve the problem now, let's make use of simulation software and let's redirect the money into devices to make sure that all students are covered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we are now talking about a very ideal situation. When whatever we're talking about now, that every student has a device, every student has data, every student has connectivity, every student is in a place where they can learn. I know we're kind of steering that conversation that way, but we need to remember that we are not in an ideal situation. Although we are actually facing this emergency situation. And lots of us, we don't know what to do because we expected now to complete the curriculum and then be faced with all of these challenges. Refilwe had something to say. Refilwe wanted the mic. And then we'll give it to Shoba. Refilwe, are you still in the room? Okay, Shoba.
Hello, hi, it's
Okay, yes.
It's Mary Masuhela from the University of Venda.
Yes, welcome.
Yes, you know, my concern is about the use of tutors, mentors, all those teaching assistants, involving them in our teaching. I strongly feel they are a very important component of the teaching process in order to prevent ourselves from getting overwhelmed with the teaching. So my question is, how can we balance and have them on board, use them fruitfully, and ensure that teaching and learning takes place effectively? Because the concern overall is about learning having to take place in any teaching situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shoba?
Hi, Rosaline. Thank you. Thanks for arranging this. It's been fantastic so far. I don't know if there are comments or questions, but there were three issues that comes to mind from the presentations. Firstly, taking into account the constructivist approaches Prof. Owens spoke about, I'm actually concerned with this, or I'm trying to figure out how we hold together these tensions. In our situation, I think at the moment our students are going to benefit from somewhat of direct instruction, explicit, making explicit what expectations are and stuff like that. So together with that, how do we allow for them to develop their own agency? And I saw something in a WITS Twitter thing where there was a comment saying that student learning was dependent on their own autonomy. And I feel like we have a responsibility to be developing that in very direct ways. That's number one. Number two was the issue of, Kibbie raised something about, the need for us to move beyond silos. And that for me was very important. And especially in our University of Technologies and probably in other universities, the professional curriculum, we've already kind of broken away from typical disciplines. But what COVID-19 is showing us, which is something we probably need to think about going forward, is that even these traditional professional qualifications and the way we design curriculum, what is being expected in this response, in this crisis, is about going beyond, unlearning and relearning, is about this, how do we break what a chemical engineer, how does the chemical engineer works with the microbiologist, works with somebody else to address the situation we are in. So we need to look at curriculum in that way. And lastly, the Dorian's presentation, I think, again, going to the fact that we talk about professional qualifications, and therefore a lot of our qualifications sit somewhat in that elite code, because there is dispositions, so there needs to be knower building and there needs to be knowledge building. And the risk that remote teaching has at the moment is the possibility that we will develop silos, because we will deal with that section, we'll present the videos, we'll do the knowledge, and it's in that building, I think, where we need to start paying attention. So it's the tours that need to happen in that quadrant that was presented. So so I don't know if they're thoughts, but they're things that I think need being addressed in some ways. Thank you, Rosaline.
Thank you, Shoba. Yeah, I think even our students will struggle if their discipline is in a specific code, knowledge code, and we are trying to get them to do something. So we found even at our institution that students from particular disciplines resist particular ways of being in that, if, for example, being reflective. If you're in a particular discipline, you might not value that. And now in remote teaching, we are maybe promoting reflective thinking. And I think students are going to be grappling with lots of things. And even as staff members as well, we will be grappling with a whole lot of things because it's challenging us to think in different ways. We had Roxanne with a question as well.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes, loud and clear.
I have one reflection and another comment and many questions. But the first reflection is... The first reflection is, it seems that around the world, the only solution that we have posed so far is online teaching. And I say online teaching, thinking that online is the digital platform, but I am aware that distance education has existed for many years, for many decades. So I have been thinking of the response. We have technology now, and we think that technology is the mean to solve the problem. That I am really sharing this, I guess, obvious fact, but I think there is something there that as academics, this universal community of academics, we haven't thought that this is the only solution that we're posting. The second element that I have is, I try to think that we have many different types of students within that, the larger diversity, actually there is a large diversity within our classes. So what I am experiencing is there are students that are really prepared to jump in. But there are others where really the type of engagement will not happen online. It will happen one-on-one communication. And on that level, I am noticing a huge room of improvement for me to really understand who are my students and what are their conditions. So I just wanted to share that with you, and I also think that our institutions save a large number of data to understand who are our students, and I think that there is also a good room from improvement to see who are actually the students that can jump in this technological online learning, and who are those that will require other approaches. That's all.
Thank you, Roxanne. Dawn, you had a question? Dawn, are you still in the room? Dawn? Okay, we'll go to Nalini.
Hi, Rosin.
Okay, go ahead, Dawn.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for this forum. My question is based on, by the way, from DUT, sorry. And my question is based on the challenge that I'm one of the cooking practical lecturers, the challenge that we will face with this online teaching in terms of the practicals, the actual cooking practicals. Because currently we assess, it's mostly based on the assessment. We assess the students once we have sort of demonstrated, and then they will then go and do what I've demonstrated. And the assessment will be based on the step-by-step. We will be helping them in the lab or in the kitchen when they're actually doing it, and then looking right to the final product. So now with the online, yes, we can send them videos, we can show them videos. There's even TV programs where they can actually watch cooking videos, cooking demonstrations, but the challenge will be on assessments. How then do we then assess to make sure that they are now competent in making, for example, a scone or a lasagna dish?
Thank you, Dawn. I know practicals is a real concern. And I've seen some scenarios presented by different institutions. I think one of the scenarios says that we can have our practicals next year when we come back. So if we start in June, and when we come back, so that means the academic year might be extended till next year. So we can have our pracs Jan, Feb. That's one of the scenarios that I've seen at one of the institutions. So it's a possibility.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Thanks,
We'll have
Rosalind.
Nalini. Thank you, Dawn. Nalini.
Hi, Rosalind. Thanks, everybody. This is Nalini from DUT. I want to just echo that I, like many of us, I'm still struggling. I'm struggling to make sense of all of this, given the fact that there's this rush to go online, right? That the rush to go online is the only choice we have. And that for me seems to be a problem. Kibbie has highlighted the social issues, and as many of the other speakers and everybody else has been thinking about it, we are rushing to go online with remote teaching, with that being the only choice to salvage the academic year. So I'm going to leave that thought as something that I'm grappling with, and this comes in the way of curriculum. Now, I don't want to belabor that point, but as we move to curriculum issues for remote teaching, many have already highlighted the centrality of curriculum in the entire remote teaching endeavors. And what's evident is that there are still holes in the system, right? Kibbie has alerted us to the technicist approach. And I think that's just a comment that we need to be guarding against this technicist approach, and not just for academics, academic developers as well, because academic developers are playing a huge role in engaging with academics. And this is where the notion of reflexivity comes in. Do we need, as a higher education community, academics and academic developers, to bend backwards on ourselves and ask ourselves, what is it that we're trying to achieve? What are the assumptions we're making about our students, about academy, about higher education? And what is very important at the moment, it seems that, and has been alerted to already, is this notion of collaboration, camaraderie, and Ubuntu that's needed in this current time. I mean, we've been talking about decoloniality for the last 3 to 5 years. We haven't even resolved. Some of us are just beginning to engage in these conversations of parity, of participation, and misrecognitions of students. Have we forgotten that in the rush to go online? So I think that collaboration, camaraderie, and Ubuntu at this time is key for us. Thanks, Rosaline.
Lovely. Thank you, Nalini. We've got 2 more, and then we will have to close the session. Sonia. Sonia, are you still in the room? Sonia?
Yes,
yes.
There was a question regarding SI, the use of SIs, mentors, tutors in the environment. And I would just like to share what we're doing at the Northwest University, if that's okay with you.
Yes, go ahead.
Because our learning management system will be 0 rated very soon, in 2 days' time, or actually on the 17th, yes, it will be 0 rated. What we did is to allow our students data. So we provide the data for them, our mentors, SIs, and also the tutors. And what they then do is to, within eFundi, on the forums and on the chats, they answer questions from their peers and work with the lecturers. So that is one way to feel, for students to still feel that connection and not feel isolated, and still get the help from their peers that they need.
Thank you, Sonia. Yeah, even at DUT, we've tried that, getting tutors to engage with students, especially in the underperforming subjects. So that's what we're looking at the moment. We've not really got feedback. We've just started it for a week now. So we will be getting some feedback as to whether it's working, whether we are reaching the students, especially with all the complications that I spoke about earlier. Evelyn, you had a question? Evelyn? Evelyn, are you still in the meeting? Okay, Sean? Lucian?
Yes, Chef, how's China? Yes,
yes,
hello.
Evelyn is speaking now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the WebiNet. We're really learning a lot. When Kibbie was presenting, she talked about how much teaching can happen and the idea of covering less content. So my question is, as an academic developer, how do you advise someone who is having the problem of what content to give at this particular time, looking at the fact that we have already lost a lot of time and we are still grappling on putting things for the students? So how do we help choose which content to give? Looking at the fact that if a student is just coming in, the first level students, they need that bridge to get to second level, and the students who are exiting now, which content would be important and how do we choose that? Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. I think that's a very, very important question. And I would advise that people go back to their scheme of work and look at the outcomes and look again and look at the content and look at which content would you require to achieve those particular outcomes for the module, and then you revise your scheme of work.
Can
and
I
remember,
add-
we cannot do anything. We cannot complete everything. And I think we'll have to also start speaking with the other staff members. For example, if my students are in year 1 and we decide as a team, this is what I can do this year in year 1, and this is what you would have to do, cover up in year 2. This is just some of the suggestions. Kibbie?
Yeah, I mean, I think one strategy that somebody spoke about was maybe planning backwards and looking at exit level and then moving back. Because I think that we do need to, I mean, I think that many people now realistically, practically are worried about exit level modules. You know, so what needs to happen at the exit level. But I think that, so that's one strategy, is look at exit levels and plan backwards. But I think what's vital is that you cannot do that at an individual level. Ideally, what would work best for academic developers would be to go in and look at departments and assist departments as a whole. You know, so saying, look, this is not something that an individual can plan for. Because whatever changes, and I said that on the chat with regards to the practicals, if you actually are delaying your practicals to the next year, it has implications for the person that's going to come after that. And so you can't make decisions on your own. You're going to have to try, you're going to have to work as a collaborative. You're going to have to work together with others in your department or in the program, because that's the only way this is going to work. Because otherwise, and those of you, I mean, many of us know, you're going to have the knowledge gaps because you haven't covered. But we have to be realistic now about what we can do. We cannot cram. We have to be realistic about the circumstances under which students are learning. You know, even if they have access to the technology, they may well not have an environment or be an environment that's conducive to learning. And then we overburden them because we have to fill in, you know, we have to complete the content. So you need to make very clever choices. But the key for me is that we can't do that alone.
Yeah, I think, can I add something?
I think Sean Hollis asked for the mic first, Lucian.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to thank Kibbie. I mean, I just got the answers actually of the question I wanted to say, and Kibbie answered it basically, because we have, you know, I'm from the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, and we have a large practical, well, most of our programs have practical components. And this is a real worry because, you know, there's been ideas being thrown around. Do we postpone it? What do we do? You know, and I think the answer has just been given. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it, because collaborative work is the only way forward. And it is important that we sit down and look at, you know, at the answers or ways forward, if we can find them, as a group of people or as an institution. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Lucian?
Okay, thank you so much, Rosalind. So I just wanted to add something to the question that was asked about how do we help to choose the content to give. So I think the first thing to know is that we are moving into the online part. So it's a little bit different from the way we are used to teach in the classroom, where probably we have 40 minutes or 60 minutes to be able to cover what you had planned to teach for the day. But in this context, when we are going to teach in the remote way, it could be that we need to change some of the habits that we have been using. So one of them is actually to break your lesson into pieces, what you call process known as chunking. So you had a lesson of 1 hour. In this case, you cannot go to teach 1 hour at the same time. I mean, a lesson of 1 hour at the same time. which implies therefore that you need to break your lesson, 1 hour lesson, into smaller manageable chunks, which will be easier for your students also to be able to digest as well. So let's say you are breaking your lesson, which was to be taken into 1 hour, then you break it into probably pieces of 15 minutes each or 10 minutes each, probably, depending on how you are teaching. And then each piece you break into, you have to make sure that you are setting a very clear objective, and then you're also setting up what you call, the activities that will be able to achieve the objective you are setting up. And then at the same time, you need to make some proper assessment methods you're putting, so that you are actually having what you call the constructive alignment, where you have the learning objective, you have your instructional strategies and activities you are putting in place, and then you have assessment strategies that you are going to lay to make sure that your objective has been achieved. But in the end, you have to make sure that your students are able to learn. You're following up. You can be able to embed some synchronous sessions, or where you actually following up and learning to what they are doing, and then be able to give them instant feedback on what they are doing and what they are not doing well, and where they can be able to improve to make sure that they are learning better. And maybe one thing that we think would be able to embark on is the availability of to start from where we are. We know that many of the students don't have facilities and tools where they are right now. So what we can be able to do, probably even if they are at home, some of their family members have devices like smartphones probably, that can be able to be a starting point to be able to move forward. If you can be able to create a WhatsApp group where you can be able to bring in all the students together, that would be one starting point. Then being able to share resources in the WhatsApp group, giving some feedback in there, that could be one of them. So we can be able to start from somewhere where we have and which technology we have in our hands as well. So that can keep us be able to move forward, at the same time be able to ensure our students are learning. Now, how much they are learning and how much you can be able to ensure that what they are learning is actually their own work, that is another point of discussion. But in the meantime, I think we can be able to get started. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I saw that earlier in the chat, people speaking about threshold concepts, and I think that's important as well, that we need to look at what are the threshold concepts or knowledge that students need to engage with. And also we need to look at knowledge, how knowledge is built in our module, and what is the sequence of the knowledge. Can we teach particular things earlier in the year? So we need to look at those kind of things as well. So we need to actually plan. We need to create a plan into how we will enact this curriculum for when we get back or when we start remote teaching. For some institutions, we've already started. Others have not started. So we're all in different spaces at the moment in higher education. With that, I think we will end. Thank you very much to everyone for attending this webinar and for sharing your thoughts and ideas, even on the chat. I will have a chance later to look at the chat, but there's lots of great ideas that were coming along in the chat. Thank you to the guest speakers, Owence, Kibbie, Dorian, for your valuable input. Thank you to Nicola and Neil for technical support. So I want to wish everyone well, and I want to wish you well as you engage with these curriculum issues and trying to organize ourselves to teach remotely. I know it is a tough situation for everyone. We will be planning more events as part of the PDCLC and also as HELTASA, and this will be advertised in due course. Thank you very much. Rita, would you like to share our next event, HELTASA event? Rita?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, everybody. Rosalind and Thea, thank you for extremely informative and wonderful sessions. And I think a big thank you to our guests. Thank you for availing your time. And the participants, I mean, it's been really amazing while we've been able to listen to also conduct a chat on the side, which becomes a sort of another modeling practice that could perhaps occur with small groups and students who have that access, I guess. But the next event for HELTASA will be on the student support side, and it will be 3 of our CLCs involved in student learning that will create an event, and we could be looking at next Friday. So we'll send out more information with regards to that. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rosalind.
Thank you, everyone. Be safe. And remember, if you've ended up with more questions in this session, that's great, because we don't have the answers. So we'll have to grapple with those questions and our particular contexts that we situated ourselves in. But I'd like to end with a quote by Saucier and Jones that says, "We have an opportunity to use our teaching personas, philosophies, and practices to both help our students understand and manage the gravity of this current crisis and reassure them that we have some control." Yes, we do have some control, even in this uncertain situation, to create a positive personal and professional experience through our continuing academic connection. And yes, that's what we'll have to do. Try and connect with each other, try to connect with our students. Be safe. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Rosalind.
Bye.